Dear friends in Jesus Christ, in today's Gospel, Jesus speaks a parable about two people who went up to temple to pray. The setting in the temple is probably to be understood as a communal setting. There would have been other people present. In this public setting, these two men prayed aloud in a very informal and personal way. They gave expression to what was in their heart before God. They lifted up their hearts to God in the presence of other worshippers. The two men who went up to the temple to pray came from the opposite ends of the religious spectrum. For the majority of Jesus' Jewish hearers, the Pharisees would have been respected teachers. They not only taught others how to live according to God's law, but they tried to live by God's law themselves. They took their faith very seriously and were regarded by the people. For a first century Jew, a tax collector, in contrast, was an agent of Rome. Tax collectors purchased the right from the Roman authorities to collect taxes in a certain region. Whatever they collected over and above the contract was considered profit for them. It was presumed they were corrupt and dishonest, likely to overcharge people. Many of them were wealthy at other people's expense. A tax collector would have been seen as a sinner who likely had shown no mercy to others. The prayer of the Pharisees begins well. He thanks God that he has lived according to God's law, thereby showing his dependence on God for all his good acts. This particular Pharisee has gone beyond what the Jewish law required. The law did not insist that everything be tithed, but this Pharisee pays a tithe on all his possessions. There is also no requirement in the Jewish law to fast as often as twice a week, which the Pharisee did. He would have been seen as expressing outstanding fidelity to God's law. However, his prayer had one fatal flaw. In his prayer, he sat in judgment upon the great mass of humanity, conveniently represented by the tax collector alongside him. He expressed a mentality which those who take their faith seriously can sometimes fall into. It is the same mentality which compares our own actions favorably to those whose lives seems to us far less religious or virtuous. Paul, in one of his letters, declares, "Do not pronounce judgment before the time, before the Lord comes, who will bring to light the things now hidden in darkness and will disclose the purpose of the heart." The Pharisee had forgotten that the obedience to God's law cannot be separated from loving one's neighbor as oneself. Religious observance without compassion for others is not acceptable to God. The tax collector stands far off from others, perhaps indicating his sense of isolation from the community. He does not even raise his eyes towards heaven, suggesting that he feels unworthy to be talking to God. In beating his chest, he acknowledges his sin. There is only one other place in Luke's Gospel where people make the same gesture. The crowds who had gathered at Calvary to witness the crucifixion of Jesus immediately after he dies, return home beating their chest. The tax collector's prayer is much more concise than the prayer of the Pharisee. He recognized that he is a sinner who is in need of God's mercy. He has come to the temple believing that he can find forgiveness from God for his sins. His humble prayer for mercy is without any judgment of others. Unlike the Pharisee, the tax collector is aware that he has nothing to offer God, but everything to receive from God. He knows that he can sing no further, that if anyone is to rescue him, it can be only God. Whereas the Pharisee looked around, comparing himself favorably to others, the tax collector looked within, comparing himself unfavorable to God. He recognized his own inner truth, such as it is, and he hopes, indeed, he trusts that God can take care of it. Yes, dear friends, in Jesus Christ, there is something in the attitude of the tax collectors that Jesus clearly admires and wishes to hold up before his disciples, before all of us. And it is that attitude of humility. Humility is not about putting ourselves down. It is about acknowledging our own reality, both the goodness in us, the good work that God is doing in our lives, and our failings. The journey we have yet to travel in order for God to bring that good work in our lives to completion. We are all a work in progress. The parable in today's gospel call on us not to compare ourselves with others in ways that make us think we are better than anyone else. The only one we can compare ourselves is with the Lord. When we do that, we realize our need to keep praying the temple, praying the simple but profound prayer of the tax collector. God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Yes, dear friends, in Jesus Christ, today is Mission Sunday, and it is that attitude of heart that will help us, make us a good missionaries, a witness to God's merciful love.